whole mess started because Satan wanted to be like God. Somewhere after the creation, but before human beings fall into sin, the angel, who was later called Satan, decided he wanted to be like God. It happened somewhere between Genesis 2 and 3. And the sin of pride came into full bloom. You know, of all the sins that plague us, the sin of pride might be our worst problem. If you think about it, pride causes most of our other sins, especially in our relationships with one another. I mean, pride is what stops us from forgiving one another, even when the other person asks for it, because, well, by forgiving them, that would put us off of our pedestal. It would take us down from our superior position and make the playing field level again. And worse yet, pride sometimes prevents us from forgiving ourselves. Because, see, in order to forgive ourselves, we have to step down off of our pedestal and admit that we failed. And we hate looking weak. And by forgiving others and admitting that we need forgiveness, well, we look vulnerable and we look weak. So we hide behind our pride. And then we create other sins to protect us from the consequences of the initial sin. And essentially what pride does is it moves us further and further away from God and teaches us to depend on ourselves, to keep on propping up the facade with lie after lie. Pride is really what causes us to argue about who should be first and who should be last, like in the gospel. Instead of just serving happily and rejoicing at wherever God has put us. Daniel, and then later on John in Revelation, told us of the fall from Satan, when he fell from heaven to earth. The archangel Michael is sent in battle against him. Michael, whom we celebrate and commemorate today. And really, we don't know a whole lot more about Michael other than his name and his job as the leader of the heavenly host. But look at God's wonderful irony in that the name Michael in the Hebrew means one who is like God. See, the one who really was like God defeated in heaven the one who wanted to be like God. He defeated him in heaven, but not everywhere. St. Michael threw Satan out of heaven down to earth, but he happily took up residence here. Apparently, this serpent is not so easily thwarted. He came down to earth and he began to plot his revenge. Think about it. You know, if you really want to hurt someone, don't go after that person. Go after his family. Remember Sean Connery in The Untouchables? He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue. It wasn't the writer of The Untouchables who invented that plan. It was Satan. It was Satan. And so he got to earth, and immediately he sought out God's children, Adam and Eve, hanging out by the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he led them right into the exact sin that he knew so well. The sin that had cost him his place in heaven, and now he would use pride to destroy the children of God and thus retaliate against the one who had cast him out of heaven. Genesis 3:5, the devil says to Adam and Eve, "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." You will be like God? Well, that sounds pretty good. And where's the downside to that, right? I will be like God by disobeying God. Oops, now wait a second. It doesn't seem like Adam and Eve really thought this one through. How can I become more like God by disobeying God? But sinful pride tells me, see, that I can be better than God. That God's just holding me back. That He's keeping all the really good fruit out of my reach. And that as soon as I do whatever I want to do, well, I'll be more powerful than God. I'll be in control of my own destiny. Now, before you blame Adam and Eve for all the sin in the world, ask yourself this. If you and I live on this side of the fall, then we understand sin. We understand all the problems that it causes. So why do we continue to sin? Before you blame Adam and Eve, you have to ask yourself, well, you know the fourth commandment, and yet you continue to be disrespectful of authority. Listen to all the vile things you have said about our president and our governor, our village trustees, our police. You know the fifth commandment, and you continue to murder in thought and word, if not in deed. Think about all the mean and hurtful things you've said about other people or thought about other people. You know the sixth commandment, and yet you continue to commit adultery. Think about the lust you felt when you looked at that certain person of the opposite sex to whom you are not married. You know the seventh commandment, yet you continue to steal. Think about the money you could have given to the church, but chose instead to have a nice dinner out or a new outfit. Obviously, I could go on and on and on. And if any of you need help finding sin in your life, just, get some beer and invite me over. And we can sit around for a while and I can help you through the 10 Commandments and we can find every vile sin in your life. And we will discover that you and I are every bit as vile as Adam and Eve. We sin. And we sin because of pride. Rather than hearing God and obeying Him joyfully just like Adam and Eve, we regularly decide that we know better and that we will do what we want. So Michael pushed Satan out of heaven. But that didn't fully solve the problem, because then Satan turned around and led us into sin. And as soon as we sin, he has God's prized possession. Now what? Michael couldn't fix this one. Satan had won, fair and square. He laid it out there, we picked it up. We chose to follow him and to ignore God. So the duty got bumped up the chain of command. From the archangel of heaven, it went up to the Son of God. But this time not to fight Satan. He could have. Jesus could have just come down and by force taken us back. But that would not have been just. See, God will not be unjust, even with Satan. And we had sold ourselves to Satan. It's the only way to get us back was to buy us back. With his life, he redeemed us. He bought us back with his life and his blood on that cross and his suffering and torment in hell. And now we are eternally God's. We are covered in the blood of Jesus, washed in that blood at our baptisms, receiving that very body and blood in Holy Communion. What Michael started, Christ finished once and for all. So then when we look at that argument that the disciples were having in the gospel, pretty ridiculous, right? Who's first in the kingdom of heaven? Who cares? We are all members of the kingdom of heaven, the very family of God. just waiting for paradise to begin. And during this time that we wait, we all struggle with our own private doubts and insecurities, but who cares who's first and who's second? It doesn't matter. And to let hurtful words and actions divide us is just playing into Satan's game. See, he figured it out from his first day on this earth. Pride is our soft spot. If he can get us to believe that status on this earth matters, he has a foothold in our lives. If he can get us to think that God's law might be nice but not entirely relevant for us, he has a grip on us. Our goal in this life is to serve and obey our God and to rejoice in all the blessings he has dumped over us, both with respect to people and things. And the more we pursue that goal, the more we are truly like God.